Hello, dear students. Let's continue our path through the startup J curve. We're going to tackle the C. Create. Temper dreams with ideas, money, structure, and teams. Said this, welcome to entrepreneurship skills. The create phase is a time when everything seems possible to ambitious entrepreneurs. In phase 1 of the J curve, startups are in their infancy, but their founders are fueled by big dreams. They don't know all the obstacles that lie ahead or how difficult the journey can be. Most are a bit naive when they create their startup, but this naivete allows them to push forward despite the unknowns and tough odds that lie ahead. Unbridled optimism is great, but don't let it interfere with startup realities and world realities. Getting off on the right foot increases the odds of a startup success. Therefore, let's look at the key activities in this first phase, as well as mistakes and misconceptions that can stand in the way of a strong start. We'll examine how to create the right team, structure the enterprise properly, and raise money. But all of these sections will matter little without a good approach to your initial idea. The 30 little secrets of great ideas. Many people, especially many neophyte entrepreneurs, believe that the idea is everything. The assumption is that if you possess a great idea, the world will beat a path to your door. Your startup will soar, and you will soon be on the sandy beach of your tropical island counting your cash. Not necessarily. In fact, my partner David and I estimate that the initial idea value to startup is approximately 5%, and that number may be high. The value of the idea is low for two reasons. One, the vast majority of initial ideas don't work out as originally envisioned. And two, no startup succeeds without a massive amounts of nuts and bolts grinded out execution, like strategy. Everybody loves to have a great strategy on their plan, but it is nothing if you don't grind it out with execution and action. With mediocre or poor execution, even the best ideas are bound to fail. Misconception about the value of an idea begins when a great product hits it big and people say, I had the same idea years ago. If I had done something about it, I would be rich. In reality, it's not the idea that creates huge success as much as how that idea is executed. Please keep that in mind. Here's a dirty little secret about great ideas. Many of the ideas that spawn highly successful companies didn't seem so great when these companies were in their infancy. A case point is Uber. With hindsight, of course, the idea for an alternative mobile phone activated taxi company is brilliant. At its inception, however, it seemed flawed. A friend of mine was asked to invest, and the Uber pitch was, we are going to offer the ability to order black car services via an app on your smartphone. But as my friend correctly perceived, numerous problems existed with this idea. First, black car services had been around for 100 years and had not been a particularly good business. No national company or brand ever evolved from this fragmented marketplace. Second, traditional taxis were deeply entrenched in just about every market. It didn't appear as if there was sufficient dissatisfaction with taxis to open the door for an alternative approach. Third, at that time, Uber had a relatively high valuation of $10 million. So my friend declined to invest. Within 5 years, Uber's valuation rose to over $50 billion. What helped it become a 67 country, 300 city behemoth, however, wasn't the idea itself, but the execution of this idea. Uber was aggressive and creative in recruiting drivers, iterating its app, and fending off counter-strikes by entrenched taxi companies and government bureaucracies. Uber has been accused of being uber competitive, but that accusation is a testament to their ability to aggressively execute their plan, quickly, thoroughly, and astutely. Another example of a product succeeding due to superior execution, as opposed to the idea, is Dropbox. If you were to look at the current success of this company and its valuation near $10 billion, you might say, wow, genius idea. I should have thought of that. But many people did think of it. I recall brainstorming with my friend Chris Cruz years ago, when it seemed obvious that central, cloud-based storage held many benefits. But numerous companies moved into that space before we could, and the clutter turned this type of a service into a commodity. Few companies made much money. The Dropbox idea was late to the party, but what its founders figured out was that an incredibly simple product combined with great execution was a differentiator. Simplicity and execution were the keys to success, not the raw, great big idea. We said this in the previous class, and I'll say it again here and again later since it's so important. The proper way to view an initial idea is as a hypothesis. It may or may not work. If it doesn't work, you will take what you learn and create something new that is more successful. If you execute this process well, then your odds of success will greatly increase. In the create phase, therefore, you should not pursue the original great idea as if it's the Holy Grail. On the other hand, pursuing potentially marketable ideas is essential. You don't need the next Uber to create a successful startup, but you do need a building block to establish the foundation of your company. You have three viable options for identifying building block ideas or products. 1. A product or service that solves a problem. There are always problems to be solved, and not all of the good problem solving ideas have been taken. Not by a long shot. If you look creatively and perceptively at what people are concerned about in any sphere, you'll find a host of problems begging for solutions. Certainly, many tech startups recognize this truth. There seems to be a new, great problem solving app born every day. But here's a classic non tech example that demonstrates many problems still exist that are waiting for startup solutions. Growing up, my friends and I loved to jump on trampolines, but they were safety hazards. Every so often, a kid would bounce off and over the side of a trampoline and break a leg or an arm. In 1997, after witnessing such an accident, Mark Publicover designed and built a safety net enclosure system. Such a system has become standard on every trampoline sold, reducing accidents significantly. And more to the point, Public Cover built a successful business based on his product's ability to solve a problem. Just as instructive, however, is that from 1936, when the first trampoline was built, to 1987, over 60 years passed. The safety net enclosure solution required no new technology. It could have been invented at any point in the preceding 60 years. It took a long time indeed for someone to recognize that people flying off trampolines was a preventable event and solve the problem with a viable product. It remains a complete mystery to me as to why this problem took so long to solve, but it's illustrative of the innumerable problems that are latent in our world and just waiting for you to solve them. Make a conscious effort to attune yourself to recognize them. 2. A visionary breakthrough product. Apple CEO Tim Cook described this type of product as something you didn't know you wanted, and then once you got it, you can't imagine your life without it. This is a tougher path for an entrepreneur to forge, but if you manage to produce something that meets Cook's definition, then you may have a big hit on your hands. Cook knows what he's talking about, since many of the Apple products fall into this category. The iPod, for instance, didn't solve an immediate obvious problem, because at the time of its introduction, the market was flooded with relatively inexpensive MP3 players. But Steve Jobs had a breakthrough vision, a series of hardware and software products linked together in the music delivery chain, where people could seamlessly buy music, download it into their computer, and play it on their iPod. At the time, people didn't know they wanted an iPod and probably weren't sure they wanted to pay for music. Even music industry executives were highly uncertain as to whether they wanted to participate in Jobs' proposed scheme, and many initially refused. But Jobs' vision was accurate and soon became the reality. Shortly after the iPod's release, music lovers discovered they couldn't do without the iPod. Facebook is another example of a product that didn't solve an obviously existing problem, but was driven by a vision. As many Facebook addicts will attest, they can't imagine life without it. Being a visionary doesn't come cheap. If you contemplating a visionary product idea, you often need a sizable investment, more than the typical problem-solving product. On the plus side, these type of ideas often have larger outcomes, and as such, they appeal to venture capital firms, VCs, The VCs tend to gravitate toward business with boom or bust outcomes that either work in a big way or fail. They require a small number of big hits, and they are drawn to visions. The bad news is that the failure rate is higher for this category than the previous one, so you need to have a tolerance for risk if you're pursuing something in this area. 3. An opportunistic product. While opportunistic product ideas may possess elements of the previous two groups, they are distinguished by timely events and circumstances that represent opportunities. These opportunities act as catalysts for entrepreneurial startups. In the late 90s, people began to realize that the large swath of corporate software would stop working in the year 2000 because in the computer code, the year was often represented with two digits. The fear was that the year 2000 would be mistaken as 1900, referred to as the Y2K problem for year 2000. It spawned an entire industry of consultants and products that help companies find and fix this problem. I would term most of this business opportunistic, in that the problem and demand were obvious. If you started a company that focused on that problem, you probably did okay, at least until after Y2K, after which many of the firms either folded or morphed into consulting shops to leverage their client relationships. This type of idea carries less risk than the previous two, since some pieces are often in the place before the entrepreneur becomes involved. They frequently don't require as much of an investment as some other startups, since some of the work has been done and the opportunity often revolves around a money making concept. If there's a drawback to this category, it's that it's easy to overestimate the opportunity and underestimate the difficulty of capitalizing on it. These ideas tend not to be blockbusters and often end up as lifestyle businesses. You also shouldn't expect venture capital money for this type of product, since they tend to like bigger, sexier ideas rather than target opportunistic ones that may have limited upside and lack strong differentiation. At this point, you might be thinking that I've forgotten a fourth product category: technological innovation. A scientist or tech genius creates something in the lab that astonishes his colleagues. It's innovative, cutting edge, and brilliant in design. Invariably, it attracts a following, and a team comes together to market it. Unfortunately, it's technology in search of a market, and it often doesn't find one. Great technology is seductive, but it can also be illusory. It creates illusion that tech brilliance translates directly into product sales. On occasion, this translation can occur, especially if a savvy business person is involved who can pry the technology out of the research lab and find marketable applications. But in most cases, it's wise to heed the voice of the tech master Steve Jobs, who in 1997 speech at a worldwide developers conference said, "You got to start with the customer experience and work back toward the technology, not the other way around." And that, my friends, is a breakthrough. One great method to help surface good ideas for the create phase is to become problem sensitive. This means training yourself to notice the problems all around you, or rather, overcoming your natural propensity to gloss over problems. We mentally fast forward through problems as a matter of survival. We obsess over every minor obstacle that crosses our path. We'll never accomplish anything, and we may be miserable. I am not suggesting that you become so problem sensitive that you become incapacitated. I am suggesting that increasing this sensitivity will facilitate your search for a marketable product. For instance, say you have to make a last minute inconvenient trip to the store because you've run out of razor blades. So you drag yourself out of the house late on a Sunday night, arrive at the store, find your package of 8 razor blades, and buy them for $32. Right, there are two big problems: inconvenience and cost. The guys who started a $1 Shape Club were probably sensitive to these problems, and it led them to a solution. Subscribe to the club for $1, and subscription businesses now is a business trend that is very popular. So try to focus on this type of problem solving business, the subscription model. And the club sends you razor blades monthly. It's a simple but brilliant problem solving idea, and it hooked me. Their cost of manufacture and shipping are low, and they also upsell you to fancier blades, resulting in even more profit. As the club's motto goes, shave time, shave money. By paying close attention to problems in your life, when you shop, when you're at work, at university, when you're online, you can find potential ideas for startups. You can even research a little bit in Quora or in the OpenAI chat. What are the problems? What are some problems about something that you like fitness or health or nutrition or technology? You'll find a bunch of problems. On top of that, you can determine if a problem is significant and widespread, rather than minor and a result of your own idiosyncrasies, by talking to others. Are your friends and colleagues as irritated as you are by a given problem? If so, and if you think it's a problem you can solve, you may want to move forward on creating a solution. And this is a much better approach than the typical brainstorming sessions that some startup aspirants favor, in which people throw out all sorts of imaginative concepts that sounds good in the conference room but lack a real world foundation and customer resonance, like having to go out to the store for an overpriced package of razor blades. I recognize that looking for problems may sound simplistic from an idea generation standpoint. Obviously, it takes more than the recognition that gasoline is too expensive to develop a marketable alternative fuel. At the same time, don't be daunted by big problems. Elon Musk was determined to tackle our dependence on fossil fuels, and his boldness had led him to create Tesla and Solar City. Training yourself to recognize the problems in life is a great start, but please don't stop there. As I will always say, be creative in coming up with solutions, and then figure out a way to make your solution a reality and a viable business. You also need to ask yourself if you're passionate about the given problem and solution. This is very important because At the first or second problem or setback, you are going to quit. So you need to be very passionate about the given problem and solution. Passion is a key ingredient and will help you overcome the many hurdles a startup presents. Startups are incredibly hard, really hard, and if you aren't fully engaged in what you're doing, then you have a problem you can solve. Numerous factors affect whether a startup idea bears fruit, but the genesis is often some problem that bothers you or inspires you. A problem that an observant entrepreneur grasps and responds to before their potential competitors, who are still in their conference rooms brainstorming. But what about the market? Before moving on to the structural requirements of the create phase, I should note that many advisors suggest that it's crucial for entrepreneurs to determine their market size as soon as possible. In fact, though many savvy entrepreneurs start with a narrow idea, but once they gain traction with customers, they expand their market. Amazon started with a narrow market of book buyers, and many observers were aghast at its high stock price when it went public. It was only a bookseller, after all. You could have almost gotten in a fist fight trying to defend Amazon market's capitalization. I kept hearing Amazon has a higher market cap than all of the booksellers combined, but after they gained traction in books, they soon expanded into CDs, DVDs, and before long they were selling washing machines. I can think of much they don't sell at this point, including cloud based web services that most of my companies use. Great entrepreneurs and great companies will keep redefining themselves as they push into new markets. Yes, venture capital firms want you to define the total addressable market, and they want that market to be big. Yes, many startup presentations include a slide that reads really big opportunity, but in the early stage of a startup, it can be difficult to make a credible case for that really big market, and if and it may not be advisable because going after too large a market may diffuse your focus. So while it's a worthy exercise to consider the total addressable market, I try not to get too caught up in it when I am hearing a startup pitch. Structure. We will just give a glimpse of these ideas as they are kind of legal and specific to countries. Structure building a better startup. This is your opportunity to create the building blocks of your evolving company. Blocks that should fit well with your idea. These foundational elements may change a bit as the startup evolves through its other phases, but they provide a basis for moving forward, so it's wise to get them right. These three elements are the following: corporation type, business plan or pitch deck, which we will be doing, that you will be doing later on this course, and team. The first one is the most prosaic, and I am not going to go into great detail about all the implications of various legal corporate structures. I recommend, as usual, that you consult with a good attorney to make these assessments. But you should know the main structures you have to choose. Again, I encourage you to spend time upfront discussing these options thoroughly with your corporate lawyer and your accountant, a good one, and considering all the facts and circumstances relative to you and your startup. Now, let's move on to the second structural element, business plans or pitch decks, which are crucial. Up until the mid 90s, you needed a detailed business plan if you wanted to raise money for your venture. These plans were often gargantuan, as if their sheer volume of pages might convince an investor that a startup concept was viable. Fortunately, both entrepreneurs and financial bakers recognized that they were counterproductive. Too often, they locked startups into an inflexible business plan that was ill suited to the company's evolution. Instead of being agile and stretching and growing as a product morphed, these companies stuck by their business plans and sometimes went under because of them. The simpler PPT pitch deck presentations eventually took over, and they are a significant improvement on epic business plans. Typically, each slide focuses on a business issue, ensuring a concise presentation. Unlike the business plan approach, these presentations leave sufficient room to deviate from the core strategy if circumstances dictate changes. While you can create these presentations in many different ways, you may consider the model established by venture firm Sequoia Capital, which suggests 15 to 20 slides in the following sequence: company purpose, problem, solution, why now, market size, competition, product, business model, team, some financials. Kevin Hale from J Combinator also has a good post about creating a more effective pitch deck where he stresses the basics: make it simple, make it legible, and make it obvious. I agree completely. Simplicity always trumps complexity. As my friend and master salesman Lance Black is fond of saying, a confused mind always says no. Legible means what it says, that you choose the right size fonts and contrasting colors. I see decks all the time where I have to squint. To see your founding prospect squinting at your deck is not a good thing. Obvious means that the slides can be understood at a glance. Overall, having a great deck is not going to take you much more time, and it's going to give you a lot of confidence when you make your presentations. It's also going to give you a much higher success rate on getting to the next stage of your funding discussions. To give you a better sense of what an effective pitch looks like, here's a template presentation I recommend for my startups and anyone pitching me. I will put the images, as you can see, in this video. There are general deck guidelines, company purpose, problem solution, why now, market size. This is pretty optional, or you can give a very specific market, the competition, the product, customer acquisition, business model, team, team motivation, current situation, financials, the deal, use of funds, post presentation, and more info. Finally, let's look to how you build your founding team. I'm not going to get into discussion of employee hiring best practices, aside from suggesting that you bring on people who not only have complementary skills, but the most important thing, passion, integrity, and commitment. Instead, I'd like you to consider whether you're going to go it alone as a founder or bring in one or more co founders. Certainly, there are single entrepreneurs who have been highly successful with their startups, like Amazon Jeff Bezos is a prominent example. But generally speaking, co founders have advantages that single founders lack. Think about some of the most successful co founders: Apple's Jobs and Wozniak, Microsoft Gates and Allen, and then Ballmer, Google's Brin and Page, Yahoo's George Yang and David Filo. I originally thought Larry Ellison was an example of a single founder, until my friend reminded me that indeed he had two co-founders, Bob Miner and Ed Oates. A synergy exists between co-founders with similar visions but different talents, a synergy that you can't approximate on your own. More specifically, here are two advantages of having a good co-founder. They facilitate getting through the tough times. There will be tough times, and it's good to have a wingman. To overcome obstacles, it helps to have a partner with whom you can share your concerns and hammer out critical strategies and decisions. You'll likely have a few heated discussions or arguments, but you'll likely end up with a better product and better decisions because of them. In addition, a co-founder should help you be more intellectually honest, a huge saver of time. If you're honest about a product, a market, or people that aren't working out, you'll be quicker to react and address it. Co-founders provide complementary skills of areas of knowledge. As skilled and smart as you may be, you probably lack expertise and experience in certain spheres. A co-founder who can supply the complementary knowledge and skill sets that you lack is invaluable. And not only because you don't have to hire someone to take on these tasks. The aforementioned synergies result when two individuals with complementary skills are committed to a common vision and work together to achieve far more than they could have individually. Choosing a co-founder can be a bit tricky because besides complementary skills, you should also seek someone who wants to do tasks you don't want to do, and vice versa, and is particularly skilled at them. In many co-founding situations, one partner will handle the customer-facing tasks, such as sales, marketing, business development, PR, and fundraising, while the other founder takes on technology responsibilities associated with development of the product or service. In addition, it's ideal to choose someone with whom you've worked before and where mutual respect and trust already exists. This individual isn't always easy to find. You should consider people you've watched and interacted with in work situations or even gone to school with. A shared history and ability to work well with someone can go a long way toward ensuring a stable and fruitful collaboration. Raising money. Raising money is a sine qua non of phase 1. Until you generate a positive cash flow, this is crucial, my friends. There are a lot of entrepreneurs who have a huge app, huge databases, but they are not making a single penny. So, this is very important in this phase. Your startup will need to raise adequate funding, or it will sputter and eventually die. As obvious as this may be, many entrepreneurs make the mistake of raising too few dollars initially, on the assumption that it will be easier to raise money later. They assume that once they have the company up and rolling, the money will pour in. In fact, at the beginning of your venture, you're selling a vision, a long term dream, and those attract more money than the coming harsh realities. Once you've launched your product, investors will be inclined to take a wait and see attitude. They will scrutinize everything, including customer traction, customer acquisition, expected value of customer, and product reviews. Any glitch during the launch can make an investor hesitant to give you money, so it's best to raise as much money as possible as soon as possible. Recognize too that entrepreneurs often underestimate two things: how quickly they will burn through the money they do raise, and how long it will take them to reach future milestones that are significant enough to justify a meaningful higher valuation. Remember, when you are reaching milestones in your startup, it equals a higher valuation. At this point in our conversation with entrepreneurs, some of them will bring up the subject of dilution. Specifically, they're concerned about diminishing their ownership stake in the company by giving away pieces of the enterprise to investors. No doubt, someone has warned them of the dangers of dilution. The truth is that the startup founder's stake in the company diminishes from day one. It's simply the cost of doing business. While dilution reduces your share of the company, the additional funds increase your odds of making it successful. So the result is that your remaining shares should go up in value. So you should focus on what your holdings are worth, not the percentage of company you own. More important than dilution or even the actual money is the value add potential of the investor. A seasoned startup investor can make a big difference. I had the privilege of working with some extraordinary investors who consistently add a tremendous amount of value. I've also had to deal with a few folks who are a net negative. So, seek investors with as much value add as possible. If you need to give them a deal to be on board, do it. Now let's look at the three potential sources of investment dollars and the pros and cons of each. Friends and family. Though you may be reluctant to ask people close to you for money, keep an open mind about it. It's usually the easiest way to obtain money at first. In the majority of startups, these individuals provide at least part of their initial funding. While your reluctance is understandable, you don't want to mix the personal and the professional parts of your life. It may also prevent you from capitalizing on a key funding source. As much as you may fear that you will ruin a relationship because your startup failed to give someone the return they expected, if they indicate an interest, I would not deny them the opportunity. I regularly invest in friends and have lost money occasionally. After an awkward week or so, you get back to being friends. My own feeling is that, from an investor's perspective, the only thing worse than investing in friends and losing money is not investing in friends and having them hit it out of the park. That's the worst of all worlds, because not only did you not back your body, but you missed a great opportunity to make money and have fun I don't have the perfect solution to the awkwardness of raising money through family and friends, but here are a few quick tips to protect the relationship if you decide to go that route. First, communicate clearly that it's possible the venture will fail, that they may lose all of the money they invest. Second, tell them to limit their investment to what they can afford to lose. Third, give them a generous deal so that they will be especially well compensated for the risk they are taking. This group is typically not sophisticated with respect to valuations or inclined to argue them, so it's your responsibility to give them a good deal. This is also a highly motivating funding strategy. You will feel a special obligation not to let these people down, and that you should motivate to work harder but also smarter. When the chips are down, the best entrepreneurs will move heaven on earth to avoid losing for those with whom they have a close relationship. Especially if you're a first time entrepreneur, this is the easiest money to obtain, and it's often the only money available. So don't dismiss this possibility of funding source reflexively. Angel investors. Angel investors are a varied group. Though many angels are successful business executives and entrepreneurs who have started and run their own companies. Some are dabblers, making infrequent investments, while others are full time investors and may invest in a dozen or more enterprises annually. More selective than friends and family, angel investors will do more analysis before committing funds. They usually invest in the early stages of a venture, like our phases 1 and 3, and they also tend to negotiate terms that will meet their requirements. To entice angels, you will usually need a prototype or minimum viable product, which is referred to commonly as an MVP. Angels don't invest as a fund, the way venture capitalists do. They are usually relatively flexible about their investment time horizon and how you run and evolve the company. Another benefit is that many angel investors cannot real value by providing advice or mentoring. Unless you've done startups a few times before, you can improve your success rate and make the journey more enjoyable. If you have some solid outside mentors to help you. These mentors often provide great assistance, even when founders have lots of startup experience. Not all angel investors want to take on this mentoring role, of course, and prefer to drop off the check and have limited additional responsibility. This type of angel investor is involved in spray and pay and also pray. They place a large number of relatively small bets on the theory that a few will work out well. Others will have a more concentrated portfolio with larger individual investments, and they expect to do everything they can to make sure the enterprise has the best chance of success, including providing mentorship. And last, venture capital. I believe, I believe that the ideal use for traditional venture capital, or what we often call sandhill money, named after the road in Menlo Park where so many venture firms are located, is for scaling a business. Phase 5. I think prior to that it's a bit of a toss up. It can be useful or it can be a hindrance, depending on the VC involved and the evolution of the company. But once you get to phase 5, scale, there is no better funding source than venture capital and the people that go with it. As we will see in more detail later, scaling requires people, process, and money. Venture capitalists are extraordinarily good at all three of those. It's worth saying upfront that venture capitalist money is incredibly difficult to obtain, and it is not designed for every startup. In fact, many of you may want to avoid this route altogether. It's great for companies with visionary, breakthrough ideas that need to rapidly scale up. Venture firms typically invest in the later stages and can write far larger checks than angel investors. They have great contacts and can provide perceptive operational and financial advice. In the handful of situations that venture capitalists have been investors in our companies, they have been great partners. But the odds are that your startup won't qualify for venture capital funds because venture capitalists are highly selective and also tend to limit themselves to a specific type of company that fits their business model. This model depends on a small number of large winners. Specifically, these firms are looking for what are known as the unicorns, the one company out of the 30 or so that can become worth $1 billion or so and return the total value of their fund all by itself. If a venture capital fund is 300 million, for instance, then a startup that receives 10 million needs to grow at least 30 times the investment to equal the fund total. To achieve that growth, venture capital investors can sometimes put pressure on companies to get big fast. This is fine if it works, but it carries a lot of risk because in many cases the imperative to get big can be inappropriate or premature. Put another way, venture capital funds can typically survive on a company that is only growing at 20 to 4%. On the other hand, you can reach from those kind of growth rates over time. So while venture capital funds can be useful for companies that need to scale rapidly, many startups and their founders aren't well suited for the venture capital business model. Without the large influx of dollars that venture capital provides, startups must reach profitability quickly so that they can bootstrap their way to additional growth. This may seem like a negative, but in my experience, it imposes a useful discipline on the venture. It helps entrepreneurs nail their business models and adopt good habits that would serve them well as they move forward. Examine your attitude. It's not just what you do in the create phase that counts, but your attitude about the business. Remember, entrepreneurs possess dreams unburdened by reality. While dreams cause you to make head in the clouds mistakes, it also provides you with a significant benefit. It's like a couple before they have their first child. They blissfully have no idea what they're getting into. For first time entrepreneurs, like first time parents, this naivete can help you move forward inspired rather than anticipating the worst. More specifically, for entrepreneurs, unbridled optimism confers two benefits in the create phase. 1. Since you don't know how difficult startups can be, you're better able to move boldly forward without too much second guessing, hesitation, and paralysis. 2. Your naive mind protects you from the ossified mentality of those who accept the status quo. In short, you are less inclined to accept the world as it is and more open to opportunities to change it for the better. These benefits will help you find solutions that a more experienced, more cynical entrepreneur may not find. Startups thrive on unconventional thinking. They need founders who refuse to give up and who won't let an obstacle stop them in their tracks. At the same time, neophyte entrepreneurs should be wary of how their naivety may cause them to fall madly and inflexibly in love with their idea during the create phase. Most startups succeed only after going through a series of fundamental variations on the initial idea. The idea that eventually carries the business into profitability and growth usually bears little resemblance to the original concept. By embracing this reality in the early phase of your startup, you may save yourself a lot of headaches, not to mention saving the business. The pretty paradox here is that you must take your idea seriously, but not too seriously. This means working hard to come up with a great product or service and doing everything possible to make it successful. Simultaneously recognize that you may have to let go of this original idea at some point. I realize that this again recalls our parent child analogy. Love your kids, but be prepared to let them go and do their own thing. What may help you manage the paradox is thinking about your startup idea as a hypothesis. You'll develop, test, and implement the hypothesis, but be prepared to find a flaw in it. The hypothesis flaw through it may be serves as a purpose because it may lead to the discovery of a successful product, albeit in a different form. Time is of the essence, so you want to possess the capacity to jettison significant portions of the original idea and move on to the next iteration. Your commitment to making progress rather to a specific product is what's important. A good adage to work by is by embrace the unknown. Most of us like logical, predictable environments, so this advice isn't always easy to follow. But if you fool yourself, if you pretend your startup journey is logical and predictable, you're going to be blindsided. Therefore, it's better to accept the unknown. You're likely to encounter both good and bad situations that come out on left field, and your well laid plans will need to be significantly altered. If you can develop this attitude, you'll have a tremendous advantage. Rather than panic and overreact when you're surprised by events, you can deal with them objectively and analytically. So, as you are seeing, the entrepreneur has to be armored with everything, with a mindset, with emotions, with a knowing, but also with a little naivete and open to opportunities, changes, and flexes and flexibility. I think the entrepreneur is one of the greatest personality traits and things that can forge a great human being and also a great startup. When you embrace the unknown, you also guard against hubris. Well-placed confidence is good for a startup, but hubris is toxic. In the create phase, some entrepreneurs are so bullish about their company's idea and ideas that they find it impossible to consider alternatives. They are also locked into their plans and goals that they can deviate from them, even when the marketplace is telling them to deviate. Embracing the unknown can help you stay on the right side of the hubris confidence line. When you accept that your startup is no more than a working hypothesis and that unexpected developments can change this hypothesis, you possess the agility necessary to change. Appearances versus reality. As founders get their companies up and running, they are often inspired by other startup success stories. That's terrific, but many times they are trying to replicate a success story without knowing all the facts. As a result, they get off on the wrong foot during the create phase, and it's difficult for them to get back on track. Most people know Twitter as a runaway success, a quintessential example of a startup that became a unicorn. But the reality is that Twitter was created as a side project in another startup called Odeo. Odeo's original idea was a podcasting platform, but when Apple created and included its own platform in all, its 10 million iPods, Odeo's reason for being deemed and just about disappeared. CEO Ivan Williams encouraged his employees to come up with an alternative product idea that might save the company, and one of those employees, Jack Dorsey, proposed a product that had to do with the status, a way to let others know exactly what you were doing at a given moment in time. Odeo co-founder Evan Glass eventually warmed to the idea, an idea that began as a way to text to one number and simultaneously send a message to a larger group of friends. Nonetheless, many Odeo investors were unimpressed with Twitter's initial test period. There were only 5,000 registered users. So Evan Williams bought the company from investors, and shortly thereafter, the company took off. But if you think about it, the majority of Odeo was focused on podcasting, and even though Twitter seems like a no-brainer investment with hindsight at that time, few people had a vision to see it as a more than a side project. Hotel Tonight is another example of a startup that, through laser-like focus on a single idea, became a huge success. Founder Sam Shank had the idea to create a mobile app that would allow people to buy discounted hotel rooms at the last minute. I recall seeing the sketch of the idea that Sam had put on a whiteboard in a tiny cramped office above a San Mateo bar, and it was a terrific concept. And this original whiteboard now is on display in Hotel Tonight's sprawling San Francisco office. In 4 years, Sam, COO Jared Simon, and CTO Chris Bailey built an amazing company that came to dominate last-minute hotel bookings. What most people don't know, however, is that a Hotel Tonight was a spin-out from another company called Dealbase, which David and I helped Sam start 2 years before the inception of Hotel Tonight. Dealbase was designed to help travelers find great hotel deals. Sam and his team did an excellent job of building that business, and it still exists today. Sam astutely recognized a potential larger opportunity in mobile bookings and quickly pursued it. The lesson, and please write this down and keep this in mind. Be cautious about the romantic stories of one-way instant startup success. If you dig into the reality of those stories, you'll often find messy beginnings. In the create phase, especially, entrepreneurs are looking for successful models to replicate. That's fine, but recognize that you may be following an incomplete or imperfect model. Startups zig and zag. They are a journey, not a destination. Building the initial product. Once you've decided on what you want your initial product to be, test that hypothesis to see if it's valid, to see if you have something that people want. First, you should realize that one way to test the hypothesis is not to build the product at all, but simply to talk to people, preferably potential customers, and see if they do indeed want it. Talk to potential suppliers and see if you will be able to get what you need to make it. If those conversations go well, then you will want to build enough of the product to give that hypothesis a fair real-world test. Having an actual product will, of course, provide a more valid test, but since it's still only hypothesis, albeit backed by positive feedback, you only need enough of a product to prove the hypothesis, which is the purpose of the minimum viable product that you already know. This may seem like an overly modest goal, but it's appropriate for the create phase. The key in this phase is to start a real customer feedback loop as quickly as possible to discover if anyone cares and how you might need to change your product so it meets customer needs better. Originally, Groupon was called The Point, which was a social media platform designed to facilitate collaboration among groups of people and make the world a better place. When CEO Eric Lefkowsky noticed that one group organized for the purpose of bundling their buying power to save money, he wondered if that could be a better concept than their original idea. After convincing the rest of his team that it was better, they put up a WordPress blog, started displaying daily deals, and began sending PDF coupons to their mail list. Their first deal was for 2-for-1 pizza at the Motel Bar, which was downstairs from the Point offices in Chicago. They didn't possess a full-blown system, and they lacked an integrated backend, email, and other infrastructure. They cobbled the MVP together in days, not weeks, and got it out there. The strong response they received told them they were onto something big, much bigger than the Point. Kickstarter, the famous Kickstarter, is an alternative funding source, mostly for things, not services. But if your product fits in, it offers another way of achieving the same hypothesis validating goal. A Kickstarter, you post the pitch for your product, complete with photos or a video of your prototype, and people can sign up to buy it. Your credit cards are charged only if enough people sign up to purchase. So it's potentially a great way to try out a pitch and see how it resonates, as well as a source of initial funding. In your initial product spec, before you start building anything, keep asking yourself what exactly you are trying to test and what is the minimum you need to give that hypothesis a valid shot. Spending this time upfront can save you from wasting a huge amount of time and money building things that nobody cares about. The Create Phase Checklist. To facilitate your ability to move through this first startup phase effectively, here's a series of questions that will help you assess your progress. 1. Have you disabused yourself of the notion that you can get started until you found the perfect idea? 2. Are you able to identify the type of idea and opportunity you wish to pursue? Problem solving, visionary, or breakthrough opportunistic? 3. Have you developed a problem consciousness? Are you on the alert for solutions to significant problems in different work spheres? 4. Have you assessed different types of corporate structures and figured out which is best for your startup? 5. Have you developed a concise but comprehensive pitch deck based on the Sequoia format? This is very important. I will add up the Sequoia format in your Brightspace. 6. Given your abilities and limitations, would your startup be best served by recruiting a co-founder? If so, have you made the effort to find this individual? 7. If you find raising goals, have you given yourself a cushion based on what you estimate you require financially? Have you increased that amount by 50 to 100%? 8. Are you reluctant to bring in investors or ask them to give you as much money as you need because you fear diluting your stake in the company? Can you see past this fear to the larger goal of creating a company with excellent value? 9. Have you assessed the pros and cons of raising funds from friends or family, angel investors, and venture capital? Have you pursued a fundraising strategy that is aligned with your startup's requirements? And 10. Do you possess a good startup attitude? Are you able to be confident but flexible and open to the reality that your initial idea may not be the final idea? So this, my fellow students, we have finished the C phase, create, which is very, very important. I will attach the pitch deck format that you will need to do in your pitch deck and pitching parts of the course. So this, please proceed to your weekly activity, and any questions, comments, ideas, please contact me via mail. The next phase is release, which is quite important. So stay tuned and be willing to do your activities and to learn from them. Thank you and have a great day. Goodbye.